Alright, so in this next Photoshop 101 video, we're going to talk about the next section of the layers panel, the opacity, the fill, and then the lock layers. So starting out with opacity, we can go ahead and click on this first layer. I've already got it typed out here for you just to kind of demonstrate what it does, and it's pretty simple. You can click the drop down arrow here when you have your layer selected, and you can literally set the opacity of that layer. So right now I've got a black text. We want to drop the opacity down to 70%. It's going to change the opacity of that actual layer. So the black went to a gray. It's showing a little bit of that white through. To give you a little bit better example of what it's doing, I'm going to click on the brush tool here. I've got my brush color set to red. I will add a new layer. I'm going to put that layer, drag it below opacity. I'm going to take just one little click here, and then I'm going to hold down shift, and I'm going to click over on the other side, and it's going to draw me a straight line from the first click to the second click. That's also something that's pretty important. I may have touched on that when we were talking about the brush tool in the earlier videos. If not, that's something that will definitely come in handy for you, using shift in order to draw straight perfect lines rather than trying to draw them. But with opacity, we'll click back on our text layer here, and we'll drop it down, and it's essentially going to show us the red line through it. So it's going to make this top layer a little bit see-through, essentially what that does. So adjusting that is important. You will definitely use that in designing things. It's a good tool here just to adjust this, and you can make it whatever you want. You want to have that be almost completely see-through, totally fine, but that's definitely used. The next thing we'll talk about is the fill layer. Fill is very similar to opacity. A lot of people will see those and they'll be like, oh, it's the exact same thing. It's it's eliminating what the color looks like it's going away, which is fine. If we were to drag this red line down here and put it underneath the fill, it does virtually the exact same thing as what the opacity was doing. But the difference between fill and opacity is fill eliminates the actual fill color. So if you have special effects on your layer, like I've added a stroke layer to this, we'll go ahead and minimize that red line. But if you have an effect on here, so we'll show the effect. Fill is only going to eliminate the black. It's only going to eliminate the layers filling. So I can set that to 0, and the only thing that will show through is going to be my red stroked outline around the word fill. And that's what the difference is. If I had this layer here, or this effect, and we'll go ahead and right click, and we're going to copy the layer style, and I'm going to paste the layer style onto opacity. It pasted the fill at 0, so we'll bump the fill all the way back up to 100, but then we'll drop the opacity down, and it's going to also drop the opacity of that effect, that special effect that we've got on there. That's what the difference is. Fill will leave all the effects the same, so it's not going to modify them whatsoever, where opacity is going to modify the entire layer as is. So those are your two differences between those things. And then bump this back up over here just to kind of give you an idea. And then lock is exactly what it sounds like. You can lock the layer, so you can make it so you can lock the transparent pixels, you can lock the image pixels, you can lock the position of it, prevent auto nesting, and then just lock everything if you wanted. I've never messed with prevent this auto nesting or whatnot, because I don't use artboards or frames really. I don't use the frame tool. You can lock individual, so say you just wanted to lock the position of it, you just click this and it's going to add a little lock down to it, and it's not going to allow you to drag it. It's saying you can't move the layer because it's locked. So if you want something to stay in its exact position, you don't want it to be movable, you know, just add that lock to it. If you wanted to remove a lock, all you do is click the little lock icon next to it, and it's going to unlock it for you. Locking the transparent pixels, again, I don't use really any of these locked layers in the designs that I do. Just I find it easier being able to actually manipulate and move the layers how I want to. But if you decided to do it, locking the transparent pixels just makes it so you can't edit the opaque portions of the layer. It's not really that relevant. So if you were to just lock that layer, you couldn't just draw or add something else in over here because it's not visible. You could only modify or change things that are invisible areas or non-opaque areas. And then if you were to use the second one, lock image pixels, it would be the opposite of that. So like you couldn't add anything into the space where those are at. And then the lock position is where you can't move it. And then if you just click lock all, it's just going to lock every single one of those options. This is not an area that I use a whole lot. These other two, however, the opacity and the fill, those are things that are definitely used quite a bit. The next video we'll go over these bottom things and what they do, all the bottom options, and then we'll get into how to add the effects to your layers, because that's probably one of the best features of Photoshop. But we'll jump in this bottom section here, the layer panel, next.